Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce our featured poet today, Bonnie Naradzay, whose work I have known and enjoyed for, I think, at least 15 years, having met Bonnie here in these rooms at the Writer Center at one of my early workshops. My name is David Keplinger, and I teach down the street at American University. I'm happy to say this is the first event that I'm hosting since returning from Rome, and it couldn't be more appropriate after having left behind in that city many of the voices and the images that I'm meeting again here and invited to the feast. Bonnie's wondrous debut collection from Slant Books. Walking among the Caravaggios, the voice of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, the allusions to Dante, and the medieval mysticism, the layers and layers of history and ideas on which that city still rests, sometimes overflowing from the Tiber. I can see now how Bonnie Naradzay is a poet who prefers a similar architecture of themes, not only in her full-length collection, but in every poem she's composed for it, as though there lay within each ruin along the roadside a map of the totality. A poet is both a builder and an archaeologist. At least a good poet has to be. For they're required to construct out of the imagination a kingdom with drawbridges and warrens and islands of the dead, a San Marcos square that floats on the swamp of memory. Then from that unconscious illuminated state, they have to step back and consciously arrange the poem into a form, one in conversation with its wildness, containing it, extracting meaning with great care, the way the archaeologist has to dust away the centuries with a toothbrush. Because she's a classicist and a Catholic, both, Invited to the Feast offers up three kingdoms who never remain separate but belong to the same principality, you might say. And we could call these realms paradise, purgatory, and hell. In the first section of the book, we find the opening poem, Paradise in the Day Shelter, and toward the end of that section, Misery. However, there's no easy, direct journey through hell, up the mountain of penance into paradise in the work. A point which taught me something deep about embracing the complicated if you want to get close to what's true. Rather, heaven is found in the nucleus of hell and vice versa. In beautiful landscapes, we might recall a lost loved one or an absent child. Rather than set in a line, these kingdoms are often set within each other as nesting dolls. In the opening poem, Paradise at the Day Shelter, heaven is a sleeping bag at night that can turn into a tent in the morning. Perhaps no other poem combines the technique of nesting grief within joy and joy within grief more than him. In a beautiful setting, a woman escapes to a hillside to speak of her dead son by telephone. It would seem that extreme beauty does not offer escape from suffering, but rather a way down and through the inferno, a way of holding and being held. I see now, having been to Rome, that if Bonnie Naradzay had lived in the 17th century and been a painter, she would have belonged to the Tenebroso school. Tenebroso, it's an Italian word for gloomy, but that's not quite right. In the school, which Caravaggio is included as a member, it's darkness that seems to hoist up light into our conscious minds. So we might see it again and experience light as wonder. It's darkness that's like a stage on which all of this heaven we are given stands in the middle of nowhere and out of nothing. It turns all of it, gloom and sorrow and all of it, into a feast, into paradise. As I say in my endorsement, which Ron Charles of the Washington Post recently seemed to agree with, Bonnie excises ornamentation and sermonizing to reveal in each of these poems the nourishment that results when life is served to us in its purest extract. We observe as readers not a product of suffering, but a process of entanglement with what's difficult, how to be of help, how to be help itself, and the urging of that calling in our time. So please welcome Bonnie Naradzay, author of Invited to the Feast.
I'm going to read 9 poems. I love this. I'm a lector at church sometimes. I'm getting into it now. And then David and I will have a conversation. So David did refer to this poem. It's the first in my book, page 3, and it's called Paradise in the Day Shelter. What they liked best was the poem I brought about a paradise you can conceal in your pocket so no one will steal it. Queenie, who stows her hearing aids in a Ziploc bag in her pocket, asks what free verse is. It's verse you don't have to pay for, Chuck tells her. Paul asks if paradise is a place. Mo shakes his head and says it's a sleeping bag at night that can turn into a jacket in the morning. And Leon, who sleeps nearby on the steps outside St. Paul's, thinks paradise could be a place to live, a tent or a camper. I say, you'd need a big pocket for that. Saul asks, if I see it, will I recognize it? And Carl says, if you speak of paradise, you must consider hell and the duality of existence. Well, Jimmy Buffett sang of cheeseburgers in paradise, Eugenia replies, and a slice of onion is heaven on earth. That they actually said these things. I just want to let you know. So the next poem I'm reading is about a dear friend, Bob Blair, who had been teaching at leading poetry sessions mornings at Miriam's Kitchen for quite a while. He was working as an economist downtown. Anyway, this is called The Third Person, page 7. For months, I visited him weekly in the mornings before pressure built up from fluids as the day progressed. We shared memories from the poetry sessions we'd led all those years with the homeless people downtown. A hospice nurse showed up every week to see how he was progressing, he told me. When I saw him that last time, he advised me to try writing poems in the third person to distance myself. Pretend it happened to someone else. That last time, his wife chatted about Madame Bovary, which she listened to at night. The awful ending. After he died, I went away and crossed the Tweed River. It flows between England and Scotland. On the first day of fishing season there, I saw a priest bless the river with whiskey as the salmon swam home. The next poem is on page 38, and I wrote it some time ago when I was volunteering for an immigration support group. 38. And it's Hanover County Jail, Commonwealth of Virginia. Lunch today for the inmates means white bread and a slice of bologna. Dinner is more of the same. The limit now, 2 meals a day to stay in budget. The jail is run by a profit-making corporation. Vending machines hold other selections like undated Twinkies and cinnamon buns. Immigration rents beds here for young, married Chinese women without papers, only fake passports they bought in haste. Fearing reprisals, they fled the provinces, their homes and families. For one bore a child after marrying too young at 20, and another had a second child, a girl. One has an abscessed tooth. As a volunteer, I write down her plight, mainly that she cannot pay a Chinese-speaking lawyer in New York City, her only hope, or even call long distance, collect. I scan her confession, read her gestures. The budget does not fund dental work, I'm told. What's more, they charge for aspirin. The next one, wearing the same ink blue pajamas and plastic shower shoes, holds her stomach, speaks of constant pain. The doctor comes once a month and sees only those who signed up long ago. The system weeds out malingerers, the female warden says, handing me a sheaf of small print regulations. So this is, I think David referred to the poem that Ron Charles liked. By the way, yeah, he was fired along with 300 other Washington Post reporters, but he has his own Substack now. Interpreting signs for my daughter. Born into air, unpredictable sprite, she spilled into my life without slowing down. It was always like this. Teaching her to ride a pink bicycle that June on Assateague, I ran alongside, shouting, "I'm holding on," as she pedaled faster, sped up, looked back, and laughed while keeping her balance to see me shrink behind on the wildlife loop. Feeling small, I wobbled back into my own life, casting a long shadow, and it wasn't yet noon. The herons in the wetlands didn't look up, even when she rounded the bend, braked at my feet, accused me of letting go too soon. So I brought two poems to read today from the book that are in forms. This is a pantoum that I wrote, page 58, during the pandemic. Remember when you were required to stand in line? You had to stand on a little circle with a foot on it, and I was 6 feet away from the next circle. Lines. This has been done before, standing in line for a long time. Think of Soviet women who queued for hours for bread. And I have learned about the lines of the Great Depression, men lined up for mind-numbing jobs at assembly lines. Think of Soviet women who stood for hours for bread, or Akhmatova outside the prison waiting for news of her son. Here, men lined up for mind-numbing jobs at assembly lines. These days, some have it easy. Food deliveries, yoga online. Akhmatova outside the prison waited with women for news and the chance to send a loaf of bread or a note inside. These days, some have it easy. Food deliveries, yoga online. Still, Camus said, the plague is within us, here to stay. I have learned about the lines of the Great Depression, where hope envisions a loaf of bread, a note from inside. Camus wrote that the plague is within us, here to stay, as it has always done, waiting in line for a long time. Thank you. And so I'm reading this longer poem that I usually don't read, but it has to do with a prompt that David gave in one of his classes that I was in. And those of you who have been in some of his classes may recall this, but the prompt was to write, the title of your poem was On the Day of My Birth. And so I asked my friend Jim Smith, who is in the same class, what do I do? And he said, well, you just look up a newspaper and find the date of your birth and read what the newspaper says, right? So what could be easier? So that's what I did. Didn't hear. On the day of my birth, Dagwood is taking a bath when Mr. Dithers barges in. Japanese minefields explode in Manila. Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin meet at the summer palace of Tsar Nicholas II in Yalta, sign an agreement to uproot fascism, Nazism, and militarism, too. Dagwood is taking a bath, and Mr. Dithers slips on the soap. Nazi officials remove 100 tons of gold from Berlin, and stash it in a salt mine in Eisenach. The College of William and Mary suspends the student newspaper when the editorial urges the admission of Negroes. The German army in Kharkov imprisons Ivan, a Russian soldier, sends him to Germany to work in an iron foundry, then on a farm. When the Americans close in, the farmer he worked for hides him in the barn, brings Ivan food for weeks, including tins of pineapple chunks, then disappears. Still hiding, Ivan forages in the orchards at night. Not knowing the German army has left, he lives inside a bundle of unthreshed wheat. American soldiers find him buried there, tell him the Russian army is near Berlin. Ivan weeps. My mother asks for ice cream. The College of William and Mary. Dagwood is taking a bath. Imagine writing your own poem about what happened. The last poem is that I'm reading is also the last poem in my book on page 71. And so in the book, there are 3 sections. Each one ends with a response to a meditation by Marcus Aurelius. And so this is called Filling Our Lives Meditation. And the quote from Aurelius is, "Do not wander from your path any longer, for you are not likely to read your notebooks or your deeds of ancient Rome and Greece, or your extracts from their writings, which you have laid up against old age. The future comes in the guise of spring rising all around after the rain ends and you've planted bulbs into the ground. Toss out last year's odds and ends. The life you dreamed about is here. Think of veering completely off the rails or going out another way, like those disciples did on the way to Emmaus, because you will meet a stranger on your journey, as they must, and invite a stranger to the feast, which is where you need to be. Aurelius died near the Danube, far from Rome. And here you are, perplexed by how to part with rooms full of possessions, notebooks. Jesus beckons to a tax collector to come with him. Matthew looks surprised, points to himself, and asks, "Who, me?" Then he rises, follows him to the banquet. When we are empty, we fill our lives. Thank you.
Have a conversation. So we'll talk a little bit about some questions that we've discussed already and that I've prepared, and then I'll open it up to questions from the audience. But when we are empty, we fill our lives. It's a wonderful way to end the reading and a wonderful way to end the book too. But you see in that statement, when we're empty, we fill our lives, that duality of these opposites pressed as close together as they could possibly come: light and darkness, emptiness and fullness. So that's something I want to talk about, is that effect and how you pull that off in your poetry. But first, tell me how you're doing. How does it feel? This book has been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm just happy. I'm happy that it's out, and I'm happy that so many of you came today. It gives me a lot of joy to see all of you. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, the preparation for this book was short. It was accepted about a year ago.
Well, it was accepted like I think a year and a half before it was published. And when I was looking through the manuscripts, I noticed that I kept rewriting and I kept changing the order and changing the poems. So it's a long time coming, and as much as I was probably writing for a long time, the poems that came into this book. So
well, that's the thing that I want to point out to everybody, that these poems were begun maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, more. And yet, when you read through the book, you'll see that they are threaded together masterfully, as though they were written in, a Jack Kerouac weekend spontaneous brilliance. They are all speaking to each other so beautifully. I read the book from beginning to end again over the weekend just to get a sense of what we would talk about, and I was amazed at how consistent they are, even though they occurred through various administrations and years of your life, and of course the changes that occur over 15 years in a person's life. The vision is the same.
My daughter to ride the bicycle, that didn't happen yesterday, let me tell you. Sorry.
Lots of those poems, but the vision remains consistent from beginning to end, and I think that's one of the things that's hard to pull off in a debut book of poems, because often what happens is that becomes the best of Bonnie Naradzay, but this is not. This is a contained series of poems that feel as if they struggled to be born together at the same time, at the same moment in life. So that's a real accomplishment.
Thank you. Thank you.
But you write about the dead a lot, whether they be dead philosophers or whether they be friends who you, in a very real way, help doula their passing. And those friends are also poets. And I wondered if we could start there with this theme of elegy that runs throughout your poems. What is it about an elegy that strikes you as inspiring or moves you to write a poem? Is that a hard question?
No, but I've thought about it because when you write about or to a person, you're focused, very highly focused, and you want to bring out the best details, and you want to explain how much that person meant to you. And when you're not writing an elegy and you're writing a less focused poem, then it becomes difficult. Does that help?
I think the urgency of writing for the dead, to the dead, and about the dead certainly does lift the poem into another realm of presence on the page.
Can I just say that the first bunch of sessions that I signed up for that David was teaching was called Communicating with the Dead.
Yeah. So
and I thought, wow, I'm signing up for that.
Maybe I got you on this road, whether you liked it or not, the road of the dead.
And then I thought, I wonder who else is going to come to a class with this kind of title. And then in walks Henry Morgenthau III in his late 90s, who hands David a book that he wrote, a history book about his family.
Mostly Morgenthau's. And then Henry wrote, 5 years later, he wrote his own poetry book. His debut poetry book came out when Henry was 100 years old.
Basically, he wrote the poems according to prompts that I had given him, because I had started teaching at Ingleside, and prompts that David had given him. So it was kind of a joint effort.
And Henry's here in this book.
Yeah, I wrote to him.
And so is Stanley Plumley.
Yeah, he is.
Your teacher. Do you want to read the Plumley poem? Just got it.
Yeah, it's for Stanley Plumley, and he taught here also while teaching at University of Maryland. And then the epigraph is from his poem Brownfields. Like every other griever, I choose a flower, a violet. He said to put myself in the poem, though I had written about the potato famine. Have you been to Ireland? He asked. Yes, to Dingle, I said, on the peninsula where sheep graze, and the Blaskets where seals bob in the shadows of the tide that will take us away. He asked if I could film that scene. Stay in the moment, he said. Be a guide. For you can't disappear in the poem or let your mind get lost in memories. Poetry is meditation and a looking back, he said. And don't be in a hurry to send out poems. Let it take years It's awful when you can't get what you want. What matters most is how the pain can try to weigh you down. Then you must start all over again. Thank you.
That I love that poem for a lot of reasons, but it strikes me as a not a memorial to Stanley Plumlee, but this kind of very uh, uh, passionate desire to get down what he taught you to, as a way of holding it or embracing it. And what was it about Plumlee's teaching, especially because you studied with Robert Lowell?
I did
as well.
That's different because that wasn't a poetry class.
But I mean, in the presence of. But so there were lots of poets around you throughout the years. But what was it about Plumlee that had that feeling of transmission when you were with a teacher? You know, sometimes the teacher doesn't say anything. They don't tell you anything, but you just feel that something is passing between them and you. And I know that there are other people in the room who studied with him and who know this as well. So what was it about Plumlee that?
Well, I'll start by saying that he would reach out and teach these classes outside of the academic forum, and I was so glad to be in them. Martin, I remember. There, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm wearing my glasses. Okay, I remember when we were meeting in Fredericksburg. Is that right? No, Frederick. When he was ill, and that's where he was living at the time. And I think it meant a lot to him. He kept meeting with us in between his cancer therapy, and so there was a passion in him about poetry, and he did reach out to us. We all had lunch once afterwards or before, and all I can say is there are some times when he had showed a great deal of passion about what we were writing. And I remember I wrote a poem, fairly lengthy, and it's in the book, and it ended with the empty tomb. And he pounded his fist on the table. He said, "You cannot end a poem with an empty tomb." But I did, and it's in there.
Well, that's a great end to the story. That the responsibility of the student too is to take in what the teacher offers, take what they need, and then to let go, as hard as it is, of the rest of it. But you have the dead, who are these teacher figures like Henry Morgenthau, he's in here, and Bob Blair, who you mentioned, our great friend, who's in here too. And then you have these other figures who, this is what I mean by how you weave the book together so masterfully. These other figures who are also teachers, like Marcus Aurelius and and Bach and all of these um, all of these thinkers and makers that are surrounding the speaker of the book from behind. And then the speaker of the book is also, and you heard the poems in the beginning, also a teacher who is teaching these folks in prison detention centers and unhoused people at the beginning of the book, and then again at the end. So there is this beautiful, very deft passage from the teacher to the student, and the student becoming the teacher and passing it along to the teachers, to the students. And so there is this beautiful river of generosity that is holding the book together. So when you say, this is a hard question.
Oh.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. When you say, when we are empty, we fill our lives, it's the line that you end the book with. So I imagine that it must be central, important to you personally. How do you, if you were reading your own book like a literary critic, how would you parse that line? What does that mean to you?
I'll parse the line, but I don't know if I could do it through the lens of or even the prism of a literary critic. But what I meant when I wrote that was you you might have this feeling of emptiness, but you know what will make you feel alive in the midst of that feeling of emptiness. And and I often think about how I feel alive when I go downtown and lead a poetry session. I feel like I'm coming alive, and then partly it's because poetry is so much a community endeavor. And I was telling somebody, of course I'm going to lead poetry sessions downtown. It's a way of getting up in the morning, and I'm just happy to have that. It's a blessing to have that time. So I hope that helps.
I think it's a beautiful answer because it's about stepping back and letting poetry pass through. Poetry being the means of the fullness.
Mm.
If you try to hold on to the poetry, you'll never be full.
Right. Yeah.
But if you allow that transmission to pass through you from teachers behind you and students in front of you, or just anybody that you share the poem with at the feast, the only way to be full is to let it pass through you, strangely.
Yes, not to hold on. Yeah. Yeah. So I just think that there's another way where I really benefit, and that is that I've led these groups for years, and there's one person, Eugenia at Miriam's Kitchen, who invariably will say, "You brought that poem before, and it could be 5 years ago." So I've got Eugenia looking over my shoulder while I'm trying to pull together poems I've never brought. And I think, Eugenia's never seen this one. So, which is a way of saying, it's an encouragement for me to be on the alert for poems that I think would bring energy to a conversation and that people could respond to. Sometimes I think that the best thing you can hope for is to have a good conversation about a poem that can engender that.
I have one more question.
Oh, please.
So Bonnie has been amazing to me personally because I run meditations on Zoom every Friday morning using a poem as the springboard for some notion out of Buddhism or some other practice. And Bonnie has come. I think you've been there almost every Friday, and I've been doing this for 3 years.
So is Jim.
Jim comes, Henry comes. In fact, this room is a very special place for me because I look at the faces of the people. Susan has been there many times. Betsy comes, yeah. So the support that I feel from you, especially over these years, has been enormous.
Thank you so much. Can I just say one thing about that? I know you want to move on, but the fact is that I'm also looking at the poems that you choose, thinking, "Oh, I want to share this poem. They will
Eugenia is
love
going to
it."
love this.
Yeah. And she's never seen it before.
Well, my last question before I open it up to the group here is related to this, and the question is the question I always ask myself: is poetry just an X-ray? Is poetry supposed to show us what's there and what's broken, and just do that work alone, or is poetry medicine? Is poetry the thing that we give the brokenness in order to mend it? What's your opinion about that? Can poetry be therapeutic for the people that you teach?
That's my hope. Because, yes, yeah, I'm thinking to myself, these people don't want sad poems. They want uplifting poems. Solveig's been to some of those classes, and so has Willie. And so then I think real hard about a poem that's not only uplifting, it also has sorrow in it. But is a great poem that will reach people. And so this is uh, one poem that I have brought by Robert Hayden. It's called The Prisoners. And it's such a powerful poem. It's so masterfully written. And I remember after I finished reading it and people were discussing it, it brought up a really good conversation. And one woman said, when my children and I visited my husband when he was in prison, she talked about how degrading it was to have to go through all these screenings to get there. And it just struck me that I never would have known that about her, but somehow she felt free to share that information. And but a lot of it was the poem. And, and the poem, in fact, was uplifting, is uplifting, in a sad setting. And the story behind it is that Robert Hayden was teaching poetry in a prison. And I can't think of anything better, more worth doing.
Sometimes it's only a poem that can hold all of the sorrow or all of the hopelessness. That itself is the poem's role. It's maybe not the arrival into this place of liberation and hope, but it can be a raft when the waves are high.
I like that. Thank you.
Any questions from our crowd here?
Okay.
Rocky is asking about the cover and whether Bonnie chose this piece of art or whether it was assigned to her book by Slant Books.
So Gregory Wolfe is the publisher of Slant Books, and we were talking about the cover, and he wanted to have a feast in it, and so I said, well, I was really thinking of Caravaggio's painting when I came up with that title, and so we went back and forth, and then he said, well, I don't want to use that painting because it's been used too much. So it's a Caravaggio, the calling of Matthew.
Matthew's
Jesus
going.
calling Matthew. And Matthew, in a way, looks like he's saying, who, me? Or is the guy next to me? Anyway, so he came up with this Giotto painting. And I said, fine. and some people think that it's the Last Supper. But to me, it doesn't look like the Last Supper, the traditional Last Supper paintings. But there is a feast going on. And anyway, does that help?
The question is, were these real conversations with Stanley Plumley, and did you write them down as they were happening in order to archive them?
That's a really good question. I'm a note taker, and I'm guessing that we did meet. We had a one-on-one when he was still doing that, and we actually did talk. He did say a lot of that, and either that or in some cases I would have sat down later and remembered it and written down what he said. He did ask me about well, were you there? And I said, yeah, I wrote about Ireland and the potato famine. Anyway, does that help?
I have seen so many Stanley Plumley poems. He must have been just a fountain of these phrases and these ideas. Great question. How much of this is autobiographical? Is that what you're asking, Susan? Mm-hmm. What is your relation to the family members in this collection?
Yeah, there was a time when just about all I wrote was about my mother and father, and And I remember a long time ago thinking, my mother is not going to be in this poem. And then she would enter in. I noticed this about myself. I tend not to read any poems when I'm giving a reading about my mother and father. I can't explain it.
So poems have minds of their own. You said, I'm not going to write this poem about my mother, and my mother enters in. Poems have minds of their own?
Yes, and it's probably good that they do.
The question is, why did you wait so long? Why did you make us wait all this time for this collection to appear?
Well, that's an easy question to answer. Thank you for asking that. I had, until I retired like 10 years ago, I had a full-time job downtown with the government. Part of the time working in the same agency that my friend Carol worked in. And so it's not like it was my only preoccupation. I had other things going on, raising children and things like that. And yeah, I would write poems and take classes, but I have to tell you that I earned my MFA in poetry a long time ago. It was a, what do you call it? It's remote. Is that the word?
A residency program?
Low residency. Okay. So I could work full time and also do that thing. And then when you go up for the residency part of it, well, then I just took the time off from my saved up leave. And that was a long time ago, and I had a manuscript then. And I suppose that I sent it around the way you're supposed to, and people weren't interested. And so I just kept writing, and I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll just keep sending out individual poems, getting them published, and then I can add to my list of acknowledgments, and then it might be more likely to be accepted. The fact is, I wasn't really aiming at getting it published, but in the meantime, I kept switching things around that were in the original manuscript, and so I wasn't in a hurry, but I was submitting to contests, and then I think I got a semi-finalist in one of them. Maybe I shouldn't have been submitting to contests. But anyway, Slant Books, I submitted through, I think, Duotrope, and I'd forgotten that I had submitted it to them.
Wow.
And I got this email a year later saying, is it still available? Yeah. Is it still available? Because we'd like it, but has it already been published or taken? And I'm thinking, no, take it.
Take it. Take my book, please.
Yeah. So does that answer the question?
You know, I want to interject here on this subject of generating work over this long period of years. I've found in teaching workshops at the university and in communities that there are three types of poetry student. The one type of poetry student will get a prompt and completely disregard it. I didn't write to the prompt, and they'll always announce it before they pass out their poems. I did not do the prompt. That's the one. The second one tries the prompt and is willing to go there and you know, finds it difficult and has to change things. And they come in and they say, well, I kind of did the prompt. I gave it a try. And I say, you know, bravo. And then there's a third kind of student who does the prompt to the letter, does everything that is being asked because they want to have the experience that the prompt is offering them, the opportunity to fail in that way if they need to, but also to succeed in a way that they would never have known they could succeed because they tried this other thing like rhyme or whatever it is that the prompt is demanding of them. And Bonnie is the third kind of student because she will always do the prompt to the letter and sometimes successfully, but then other times maybe not as successfully, but learning something as you go, just
Mm.
learning. Okay, that area maybe is not for me, but this area I learned today is actually very fruitful when I go there, and I've never tried that. So prompts for you are extremely generative. I remember a lot of the prompts that then became poems in this book.
Yeah. On the day I was born.
Yeah, that, for example, that and many others. But I will say this too, that traditional forms and fixed forms in poetry are just prompts that many people have used before we ever came along. So you have a ghazal in this book. You have.
I didn't. Did I read it?
You did not read it, but I was going to ask you if you would.
Oh, is it in? It should be in there.
So while you're doing that, a ghazal is a form that comes out of Farsi love poetry from 800 years ago, and the Quran, and it involves a refrain line at the end of every couplet. The couplets are generally long lines, and then the last word of each couplet is this word that keeps getting repeated. And okay, and then at the end, the word comes back along with a few other devices that are typical of the form. But it's a very demanding form to do well. It's an easy form to accomplish if you're just trying to write a ghazal, because you have the word and it kind of writes itself. But if you really are going to do it well, it's hard to pull off. And this is a beauty. So would you read it?
This is ghazal with a phrase from Dickinson. At last, the snow. I shoveled the walk before disappearing inside my black hole. The snow kept on falling anyway. The hospice worker said the dying regret not having lived true to themselves before slowly fading away. Genesis starts over and tells two different creation stories. We can't even get this right without losing our way. Earth is close to losing its second moon, and black holes obliterate galaxies. The stars disappearing, just going away. Prisoners at Guantanamo, never charged, wrote poems on styrofoam cups until guards took even this writing away. I told my friend, I don't think I have a self. He said, we all do. So I tried to say, it's somewhere else, not inside hiding anyway. White of forgetting, sustenance of despair. To find my son, I'd sail past the pillars of Hercules if I could stop drowning this way. It's my little. Thank you.
I think that's a good place to conclude. The experience that I have reading your poems is like stepping into a river and feeling the wisdom flood past me and being a part of that current. And it's a true gift. So thank you. Thank you, Bonnie. And congratulations.
Thanks, everybody.